This is St. Pete X, affectionately known as SPX. SPX brings you St. Pete's brightest business people, civic leaders, and citizens who share their insight and expertise as well as their love of our great city. SPX is presented by the St. Petersburg Group. Head to stpete.co to check out more episodes, and by St. Pete's most effective marketing agency, Big C. Browse to bigc.co to see their work. Now enjoy the conversation. We're here on SPX, and my name is Joe Hamilton, and Ashley Ryneska is going to introduce our guest.
Welcome, Gianfilippo.
Funny story, first name being Steve.
Yeah.
All my friends in high school, we got to graduation, and they called my name, and they said, Steven Gianfilippo. And my friend looks over at me, he goes, wait a second, your first name's Steven? I thought it was Gian, and your last name is Filippo. So for 4 years, people just got my name wrong, so kind of become accustomed to it.
What do you go by now?
Flip.
You don't go by Steve?
My mom calls me Steven, and my sisters call me Steven, and everybody else calls me Flip.
Everyone else, so you don't have to pass some kind of test or to get to the stage where, so I can call, having never met you, I can move to Philip now?
Yeah.
All right. Feels good.
Well,
Just skip ahead.
Yeah. Cut in line.
My first question gets the full scolding name. Steve, John, Filippo, why the hell are you taking Station House to Tampa? Tell me why I'm wrong for being angry about that.
You should be really happy about that.
I, for the record, am not angry about that.
I'm not really either.
Congratulations.
I think there's a good point to be
Rock
made
on.
here.
Thank you.
Which one's ahead, the 600 block or the Tampa one?
600 block is ahead.
So
that'll be
two.
done in like a month. Tampa will be probably quarter number 2 of 2019. So we have a long runway. Why should you be happy about that?
That's what I meant.
Well, because it was born in St. Pete, right?
Right.
So now we're spreading our seeds all over Tampa Bay. And it started in St. Petersburg. And I've always made a connection between Tampa and St. Petersburg. And I use the word cross-pollination. The great part about it is the buzz in Tampa of people that know Station House and know St. Petersburg. We're excited for it. And so I think that is really shedding some light on St. Petersburg, right? Because this is our original location. Not only that, the developers that are behind Hyde Park Village, I don't know if anyone knows WS Development, but they are a private developer. They are based out of Boston, and they have 93 developments across the country. They have multi-billion-dollar investments. They know Station House. Their people are here in St. Pete. They were here yesterday and the day before. And so it is bringing attention to not only Station House, but St. Pete. So that's why you should be happy.
I'm happy.
So be happy.
Very happy. Very happy. I remember we had Tim Moore from Diamond View Studios on the show, and they've done a lot of production at Station House St. Pete. And they were talking about the need to start to infuse downtown Tampa with some of what we've got going on here. And his beat was really with respect to the art scene and some of the murals and some of the really just sort of the eclectic look and feel. But, now you've identified maybe some other areas where Tampa really is taking notes from St. Pete's book and applying it to their story.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think I always make the connection between Tampa and St. Pete and correlate it to like a Denver-Boulder relationship or Manhattan-Brooklyn. And I think that speaks volumes like for the personality of like St. Petersburg, and that there is a complementary relationship between the two cities. And Tampa's starting to catch up. Tampa's learning from St. Petersburg, and we should be learning from Tampa. Tampa's our big brother, and it's a much larger city population-wise. It's pulling from lots of different areas, and we're seeing a huge influx of capital in both areas. And so I never discount what we could learn from each of the cities because they're very complementary to one another. And St. Pete being very artsy and cultural, having the best beaches and the best weather. Tampa being more focused on conventions and sports teams and, different things that complement us well.
And for those listeners who have never stepped foot in a Station House, could you give us a little bit of a rundown?
I can. Yeah, I can. Station House is, I like to say, cool and geeky enough to be like WeWork co-work space, but cool enough to be like a Soho House in New York. And so it's a combination of co-work space mixed with a social element, a community element. We have individual memberships where you can come in and use the space, use the conference rooms, use the business center, exercise if you want, take a yoga class, visit the restaurant. or you can actually rent an office there as well. So we have furnished offices available. We have multiple conference rooms, and it's a little bit more community driven than you would expect a co-work to be. And so that's where I have a lot of pride in the brand, is that we try to morph into the location that we're in. And so we tried to make Station House a representative of what to expect when you visit St. Petersburg. So there's lots of art on our walls. You get a huge mix of demographics in the space, from artists and creatives all the way to real estate professionals, financial professionals. Ex-banks presidents are in there, starting new businesses and consulting businesses. We have politicians in there. And so we really welcome everybody into the space. And we try to just make it, a place where people can come and meet one another. We have tech companies in there. We have Panda Doc, which is based out of San Francisco. And we want it to be a meeting place where collisions happen and people come to meet one another.
That definitely does happen. One of the things I love about it, and I think you and Ryan Griffin are similar in this regard, and that the things that you guys bring to the city have a ton of character, and it's always unique. There's nothing cookie cutter about the Station House. It just throws St. Pete flavor out, and it builds the culture. And I think Mandarin does that as well, and some of those things. And you've always been sort of boutique in that way. Why do you stick in that space?
I think, and thank you for that. I think to be in the same sense with Ryan, who's actually a good friend of mine, is, we bounce around ideas all the time. And if we had like whiteboards
they'd be black
around us, they'd be black, and that's all we'd be doing. So I think I'm conservative by nature. So I like choosing buildings, and all the buildings that we own downtown St. Pete are historic or built in the early 1900s. And I've always been better with taking things that exist and tweaking them to make them better versus going from a blank slate and an empty postage stamp property and saying, hey, let's build something new on it. And so I've always gravitated towards that. And there's obviously a lot of history in the buildings that we've acquired. But I think you have to look back to the roots of St. Petersburg, and, just every property that I bought, the first thing that I do is I go to the history museum and I pull all the cards on the property. And it's like super inspirational to go do that. And it's very powerful to see what St. Pete used to be like, not only in the 20s, but then, there was a lull, and then in the 50s and around World War II. You look at some of the photos, and the streets of St. Pete were just flooded with people, whether it was military or dignitaries. It was a cool place to be here, and some of that architecture just doesn't get represented anymore in new buildings. And so I've always just found it really special when you talk about being different and bringing cool, is you have the best opportunity to present that with the older buildings than you do with doing new construction. It's just hard not to be cookie cutter when you do something new. So that's kind of what we've been focusing on.
You talked about the utilization of the space and how different workers and those that want to be active can do yoga on the rooftop, and eateries and opportunity to have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. But to Joe's point, really the architecture and the design seems to be, it's one of the most beautiful spaces, I believe, in downtown St. Pete. I'm sure you've heard that before. Where do you, besides historical reference points, where do you glean most of your design inspo?
Well, I was born in New York, so, that's where my roots are. And so there are a lot of buildings in New York as well that are old buildings that have been redone. And so a lot of my inspiration came from most of the buildings in New York. So Soho House in New York, or Newey House, which is a co-work space in New York, Gramercy Park Hotel. The columns that we have wrapped on the second floor, that idea came from Gramercy Park Hotel lobby. The double chandelier that we have, Gramercy Park has one in their lobby. So I pulled a lot of design cues and things that were memorable to me in my travels and being in New York, and pulled them down here. And, you mentioned the word different, Joe. I mean, like, I talked about this with WS Development the other day, and, there's form and function. And we were joking about it because, their CEO leads with form, and so do I. Like, we're like, we can go back and fix the function, but let's get the form right, because that's what motivates people. Visually, it's very easy to attract people to your space visually, right, first. And so we want that first impression to be something unique and something cool. And so think New York was a big inspiration. And then obviously the research that we did at the History Museum to kind of bring that to life.
If you were ever given a chance to add one more level of expansion to the station house as it exists today, what would that be?
Well, office suites are in big demand, and people are trying to get to the downtown core and do it affordably. And so, I think it would be a toss-up between more offices and probably some residential component. And so maybe some apartments or hotel rooms. If we could put it all in one building, that would be ideal. We just bought another apartment building across the street from Station House, and we plan on doing live-work units there. We have a hotel a few blocks to the north of Station House. These all complement the lifestyle, right? It's more of a lifestyle brand. So, and what do people need? They need a place to work. They need a place to rent if they're moving to downtown. You have developers that are here for the next 2 years that always stop in the Station House. And some of them are from out of town, and so they need a rental apartment. Then you have hospitality needs. So like, for example, Startup Week, some of the organizers came all the way from Orlando. One had a car trouble. We put them at our hotel. We try to meet all the different touch points of your lifestyle in a small way in St. Petersburg. So I think a residential component would be ideal, because then people don't have to leave the building at that point. So
I don't want to overblow the compliment, but I think even different just wasn't the right word. It's just you said lifestyle, and in St. Pete, it has a personality, it has a vibe, and there are feeders for that vibe. There are things that push out that vibe. And I think different is easy, but I think what you and Ryan are doing is that it's feeding the vibe and it's creating it. So it's life-giving in a cultural sense.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I hired someone out of state to come and work for me, and she wasn't familiar with St. Pete, and she came from LA, and she was really keen on the places to see and be seen. And when she had her first opportunity to work out of the office, she chose the Station House to see and be seen. There was that cool component to your space as well, where socially, it's revered as being sort of a tool in moving through.
Yeah, I think she'll probably be happy, because the apartment complex that we're doing across the street, we're going to design it after a place in Hollywood called Poly House, which is a hotel / furnished apartment building. But that's a great compliment to hear that, we get a lot of people at Station House that come in and take photos and get to our member spaces that aren't members, and they find their way up there, and we'll find them online that, they've taken photos, and, we want that stuff to happen. So I'll reach out to them personally and be like, hey, thanks for sending, for taking photos on the roof. If you ever want to get up there again or get into any of our other buildings. And I think, you touched on something that I focus on, which is getting the residents and the visitors to take ownership of your property. And that's what we try to do at all our properties, which is establish a level of pride in the people that visit and live here in the community, that they say, hey, you have to come check out this place. This is our city. Come check out all these cool places and come here. And organically, that allows us to really not spend a lot of money on marketing if we do it right, because then there's all these picture perfect moments that take place. Well,
if it's interpreted as a catalyst to aid in self-identity or social connection, that's a really interesting byproduct of what you've created. People that are taking photos on the roof and using that to sort of define who they are professionally and otherwise.
Yeah, and that's what happens a lot. So, I'm a troller on Instagram, so I go on there and see who's like tagging Station House, and
you get cool points for that kind of.
I guess it's kind of funny too, because people that I reach out to are excited that we actually acknowledge that they were taking pictures at our place too, and so we encourage it. We have that one room on the 4th level, and it has a neon sign that says, I woke up like this. And I think that's, such a powerful, representation of not just Station House, but like St. Pete, right? Which is like, people come from all over the world, and, they just announced that Clearwater Beach has a #1 beach in the country, #7 in the world. And it's like, there should be a sense of pride that like, we live here, like we nailed it. Like we know what we're doing. We wake up here every day. Like we know what we're doing. And you guys have to fly in and visit St. Petersburg, and it's part of your vacation plans, or you're doing a convention and you chose St. Pete or Tampa as your place to go. It's like, yeah, we wake up to this every day.
So if you think about that room that I woke up like this, and you look at some of the photos that folks are taking, it seems to be celebrating sort of an alternative lifestyle, or sort of definitely diverse population, meaning, when you go to New York and you want to integrate into New York, you go and see the Yankees and you get pizza and there's a homogenization to the tourism. But when you look at how people are engaging with the station house, you don't really see that homogenization. You almost celebrate the complete opposite of that.
We do. It's a big melting pot.
Yeah.
Right? It is. And, diversity is key to our location. I think it's Florida's a melting pot in general, and so I think you see the personality and identities of those that come from other areas like New York and different places, and even the generational people from St. Pete all provide some identity to, the buildings and the culture here locally. So it's a big melting pot. And sometimes it's great to be different. Sometimes it's sort of a challenge, right? Because you can't get momentum behind things if everybody's so different, has opposing opinions on everything. So, but I think Station House is definitely meant to cast a wide net on who we have under our roof.
So number 2 is 689 Central, and you're in the process of refurbing that.
Yeah, and that's been a long process. We bought that. I just looked at the books. I think we bought it almost 2 years ago, and we had a heavy ambition to add some space to that. It's another building that was built in 1924, I think, or 1926. And so I think we learned not to be too aggressive on old buildings like that. And it was going to take a lot to update it and retrofit it. And so we also saw the market was getting a lot better too. And we bought at the right time. And so we've taken our time on that one. We knew with the market going in the right direction that we could take our time on that one. But, what we found is that there's a tremendous amount of value in providing access to our amenities at the main Station House campus for satellite locations like 689 Arcade. And we love the personality. You talk about different, the different personalities in the city and the diversity. The 600 block has a complete different personality than the original Station House location. And then you have the Edge District that has a different personality. So
could you define the personalities?
The original Station House is more in the core financial district of downtown.
Right.
Whereas 689 Central and the 600 block is more of a grassroots area. And so mom and pop shops, startup businesses, small businesses that need a place to thrive because the downtown core is too expensive rent-wise. And it's more colorful, really. I mean, we took the original Station House logo and we didn't want to change the logo. But, if you look at the Station House Arcade logo, it's very colorful and artsy, and we wanted that to represent what we think is the culture of the 600 block. But it's really cool because you're only, 4 or 5 blocks away and you have like a completely different personality on the ground. So, but we plan to have close to 20 offices in that location, some retail space up front, and break room and conference room similar to what we have at Station House. But the cool part is that amenities that we don't have at the 600 block are available to you at the main campus. And then when we open up in Hyde Park Village, then we will also have reciprocity in Tampa, which is cool. We're finding a lot of people work on both sides of the bay, but also want a change of scenery every once in a while. If they're mobile enough, it just kind of by definition, they want to be in different areas,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So you're investing, or you're in the investment scene quite a bit and investing occasionally. It's strange. Every time I talk to people in the space, and a lot of times it's with the startups, half the people think there's no money in Tampa, and half the people think there's plenty of money in Tampa. Where do you fall on that? Especially Tampa Bay.
I think it's the anatomy of the investor that needs to be focused on, because it's funny you say that, because this morning I was meeting with someone, a friend of mine who's also a business partner. We share office space in Tampa. He's part of a group that has an $8 billion real estate fund based out of Philadelphia. They know the demographics of every city in America. They get all the data. And the one thing he was touching on when I walked up to him, he's like, oh, well, we were talking about, I think people don't realize how much wealth there is in the Tampa Bay area. And it's just a matter of trying to find the right people, right? And the anatomy of the investors, right? Because I think traditionally Tampa is more of a real estate investor type community with a lot of wealth and different businesses, but it's not really a tech investor type anatomy that's here. And so I think it's about changing the expectations and kind of opening up the opportunities for different types of investments to the people that do have a lot of wealth here. Because what happens like in a city like Boulder, which I consider to be very similar to St. Petersburg, is you have some companies who have went through a sales process, an exit, very large exits. And so you have guys in that community that have made hundreds of millions of dollars. What do? They reinvest in tech. We just don't have that here yet. We have guys in real estate who have made hundreds of millions of dollars in different industries, but not in the tech. So it's about bridging that gap. And I think, changing that or, recruiting some of these guys to, move here. So,
yeah. One of the things we talk, the banker that you mentioned, I think, not without revealing him, I think it's a common acquaintance of ours that the ex-bank president that's at the Station House. And one of the things we're talking a lot about is the model where you have an incubator sort of environment, maybe you have 10 startups in it, but then have a permanent C-level staff, a CFO, a CMO, a CEO, COO on that act as fractional in those roles fractionally for the different startups. There'd be a little fund attached to it, but then the idea to being that to really focus that a lot of the solutions for that now, they have sort of temporary help where you can come spend 2 hours with a lawyer and then you're off back on your own again. But when your CFO is right down the hall from you and you need to look through a term sheet or whatever, and they can help in daily meetings like a normal company. That sets people up a lot more for success, which gets us the big wins that we need to attract that kind of attention. And in turn, I think it gives a comfort level to some of those investors because they know that people they understand are there to watch over things a little bit. I think it could be an interesting model.
It sounds interesting in concept. Startups are very volatile, obviously. So, providing structure, I think, is important. The company that I seed funded about 5 years ago, I wish we had that kind of structure around the company because I think we would have probably found our sales vertical a lot quicker and probably save the company a lot of money. But I think it's a neat concept. I do think it's because startups start on, a shoestring budget. Right. So if you could outsource as much as you can, I think it's a great idea having that or some type of board of directors, maybe 6 to 10 people that can consult on a certain number of companies on a consistent basis, I think would be really helpful.
So when you're personally looking, what are the key components of an investment that makes you want to look deeper into it?
Well, I think it depends. The criteria is a little different if it's tech versus real estate.
Let's go tech, just because that's more fun.
It is definitely more fun. There is a common denominator amongst any investment, and it really comes down to the person that's behind the idea. And 10 out of 10 times when deals have failed, it always comes back to the individual. And a deal could fail, but we'd look at doing a second deal with that company if person in charge handled it properly. And so even a bad deal can wind up being good down the road if the people behind that organization treat you fair. And so I think it really comes down to studying the people that are behind any company that we would look to partner with and invest. And, I could say with 100% certainty that deals that have went bad have all 100% come back to the person running the operation, the head guy, and not really, oh, hey, the market turned on us. Because even when a market turns on a business, whether it's tech or something else, a good person and a good business person that has a lot of integrity will find their way out of it and protect you at all costs. And if they wind up failing at that point, it doesn't hurt as bad because you knew that you're in business with with someone who cared about the business and cared about your money that you put in. The second step to that is having a company that has their own, capital into a deal. And so we always try to look for deals where the partners are vested. And, obviously they can't vest at the same levels we can. But as an example, the tech company that I invested in about 5 years ago, those two criterias were met. And so I felt comfortable putting money into that deal because I knew that the founder was a stand-up guy. He had a good family. And then he's a guy that would, he had his own resources into the deal, his own capital, and at one point even leveraged his home to put more capital into the deal. I mean, this guy's, he's committed to the cause. And I think those are the two things. Underwriting a deal and the metrics of a deal, that's obviously, that has to work to make it. But I think those are the two key components before you could even get to the third.
And beyond integrity and some of the, the more evident qualities, are there any qualities that might be uniquely valued by you and people that you look to work with?
Well, if you're talking about tech,
founder qualities and the people themselves. Honesty, integrity would be two,
it's it depends what stage you catch the company at, right? Because a guy with a great idea who's really smart just might not be good at people or operations, right? And
or mispronounces your name.
Or that'd kill it. That would kill it. I let that one slide all the time. Otherwise, everybody would be written off. I'd have no friends, I'd have no colleagues.
Anything that isn't evident, obviously, hopefully honest or hopefully transparent. Anything that's a little odd, but you found it works.
Well, I do have a little secret. I always say
I knew it.
Yeah, people's real personalities come out when you give them one of two things: you give them alcohol or you give them money. And, if it's a startup, you can't really give them money yet, but you can certainly give them alcohol. So, spending some time with people that we're looking to invest with or partner with, it's good to catch them more in a social environment, not in like the interview environment, right? Because everybody's got their game face on and
right,
or acting a certain way. But, as soon as you can get them into more of a relaxed setting where you get them to kind of show you who they really are is what we want to see and what I want to see, because I think that's where you really, determine who you're dealing with. And so, we learned that on one deal too, because we had a deal that we committed some capital to, and everything was great. And then it was a real estate deal. And so we went, we did a site visit probably a year into the deal. We went to do the site visit, and they sent like a very junior person to meet us there. And, that was like kind of a red flag, and so we were like, well, that's kind of strange. Why wouldn't you make the effort to have the same guys who took the money show up? You're sending a very junior person that we haven't met. And, that's when we started to see all these red flags coming from that. And so we took the guy out to dinner, and then, boy, it was just like the floodgates opened up. This guy was like talking about all this crazy stuff that we had no idea about. We're like, oh no, I hope this isn't representative of their organization.
Abort.
Yeah. By that time, it was too late to abort, but that's a pure example of, getting through the interview process and getting to know people a little bit more before you make that commitment. And, we hear it all the time, like my partners that I go to for capital, sometimes we'll do deal without documents because we have a level of trust. And, I'll overhear them saying, well, don't worry about Flip's deal because I know they're good for the money if anything happens, and I think that's the type of people that we want to be selective and deal with in any industry. And, obviously the characteristic of hard work,
sure.
Guys that are working around the clock, I think that's where the real money's made if you're in the tech business. And we see that sometimes at Station House. We see guys that are there at midnight. We see guys that are there early in the morning, guys that are there on the weekends. And I'm like, those are the guys that I look at and say, oh, that guy's going to succeed, and I store that in the back of my head. I'm like, okay, well, if we need somebody down the road to join our organization, who do you think I'm going to go to first? The guys that I see there at midnight working.
Well, maybe the other guys are, they're listening to your advice and they're out building up their tolerance so they can do a deal with you.
Maybe the guys that are there at midnight or first thing in the morning, maybe they're not good family men.
That's a good point. Maybe they're single though.
Yeah. For good reason.
Well, one's only 21, so he's got some time, I know. So I'm never there at midnight, by the way.
You should do 360 interviews too. Talk to other people. It sounds like you talk to other people who know said person. Talk to said spouse. Talk to said.
That's a good point. There needs to be balance.
For a weekend.
Just see how the dog takes to you.
I am guilty of working too much.
You won't go back.
I feel like you know me already. I'm like, I'm guilty of working too much. Yeah. I'll say it.
Well, the beautiful thing is, you've obviously set your life up with a degree of freedom. And so whenever you have freedom, it doesn't feel like work because you're choosing what you want to do and you love doing it. And it's certainly an aspiration I have in getting there. But I appreciate it, that sort of freedom to work hard and enjoy every second of it.
I think you see a lot of that in St. Petersburg, right? Because the weather and the quality of life and everybody's outdoors. I think you find like, do you guys ever like I do this a lot, like on a rainy day, do you get happy when it rains that you could focus on work because you don't want to be outside? Because that's how I am. If like it's raining and I'm like, cool, I could stay inside. Because I have this like gravitational pull that's like, oh, it's nice outside. I don't want to be inside working. I want to be outside enjoying this weather.
What do you do outside?
Just a walk. It doesn't have to be anything. It's just the fact that we have great weather here in St. Pete and Tampa.
I feel that way more when it's 150 degrees out than I do when it's raining, but I get this, I get the sentiment behind it for sure.
Yeah, but that's going to more of a lifestyle thing, right? Which is, hey, you have so many entrepreneurs, right? They're like, they want the freedom, and we have them. We've had so many of our employees that are like, we want to be entrepreneurs, and it's hard to balance having employees like that. They're always like, I want to be my own boss, and then they don't really listen to you. But it's that freedom, right? And especially in St. Petersburg is like, if you can get back to the office at 8 o'clock at night or whatever, but then you could take a break. And I loved when St. Pete had spring training downtown because it was like ritual. You go see a game, you have, a hot dog, and you're looking at the water. It's sunny, but it's like Thursday at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And so having that freedom, I think, is like really important, especially in a city like this.
So born and bred here in St. Pete, yes?
Born in New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did you come to St. Pete?
When I was about 2.5 years old.
Have you ever had a calling to live in another state?
Well, I lived in Tokyo for about 3.5 years.
Quite a big jump.
Yeah, so I guess you can call that another state.
Well, like Colorado or like Austin or going back to New York for a beat.
I think we'll end up back in New York, or at least have a place there, because a lot of my inspiration comes from New York, and I have such a big family there. But a lot of my ideas, drive, experience come from New York and Tokyo, really. I mean, because those are very fast-paced cities. And sometimes it's really annoying, right? Because you expect things to be done at a very fast pace. And sometimes down here, they don't happen as fast. But it's so funny because when I run into someone who's from one of those areas like New York or Chicago, and they move down here, they all say the same thing. They're like, why do things move so slow around here? And I think that's good to have people like that in this area, right? Because you want to keep pushing, and we want to keep pushing forward, and we want, we're not on the planet that long, right? So if you want to be in a city and you want things to develop, you want them to happen, you want to see these things. But we're in Colorado a lot because we have a tech company out there. So I get a lot of inspiration from Boulder, where the company is. And then, just try to visit as many places as we can.
Right.
And obviously the antidote to people being half as fast is to do twice as much. And then you're pretty much, as long as you're always filled up, that's what I find.
He's good with math. Yeah.
Well, you gave me like 2 minutes to prepare to say that. So I appreciate
There's
that.
like drawings on the table
Don't finish
here.
talking.
Just
Don't finish talking.
There's an abacus. He's pulled out his abacus to figure
I'll put
that
my shoes on. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I don't need
There's
to
more
count.
than one way to the finish line. That's what he's saying.
So working a lot is something that you've identified with. You also have a family. What's your strategy for work-life balance? What do you do to make that happen, or do you?
I think that's the biggest challenge. I've always had a philosophy that I want to work hard so I don't have to work. I don't work hard to get rich. I work hard so I could have more free time, and work hard to retire, right? So ultimately that's having all the free time in the world once you do that. And that comes at different levels for different people. Some people need to have billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think it's all relative to what your plan is. My fiance happens to work with us at Station House, which is nice. I get to see her a lot. I probably talk way too much about business around her because that's just how I'm wired, I think. I have a 8.5-year-old daughter. Actually, she'll be 9 in April. So she's almost 9. I take her to work with me when I can. She loves it. She has a great time. She'll sit at the desk at the hotel and, try to answer the phones and go around the hotel and make sure it's all clean and neat. And she's great at Station House. She's a people person. And so I think going back to that lifestyle is, if I'm going to work a little bit more than most people, it was my way to strategically get the family involved with the business, right? And keep us all close. And so that it's not, oh, hey, I'm leaving for work. I'll see you at 6 o'clock and you won't hear from me, or, hey, I'm going to this and you can't come. So we kind of created this little ecosystem where like we could talk about things and it's part of the family conversation. And then scheduling family time is kind of costs us money because it's always last minute with us, right? So I'm very bad, and I think my fiance is too, at like booking a vacation like 6 months later where you save a lot of money when you book. We're like, okay, we got some free time, let's go. And we wind up going. And so that's, probably one of the biggest challenges is that balance between, family and work. So
where are you getting married?
I think we want to get married in Colorado and then have a reception in New York and kind of do the split thing. And it just fits our personalities better to do a quiet, private, family-only ceremony and then hold a big party in New York a few months down the road.
Nice.
So I have a big family in New York. Her sister's in New York at FIT. And we love being in New York, so we thought that would be a good location to throw a party afterwards. And that seems to be trending where you don't squeeze everything into one day, and there's a lot of pressure on you to kind of follow this ritual.
The reception's like directly after photos.
After photos, and then you have to cut the cake, and you're kind of just putting on this theatrical event for everybody else. And some people think that's great. I think our personalities are more like, let's do what has the most meaning for us and takes away all the stress.
She's probably taking notes with all the weddings that you have at Station House, and now your tab's just running right now.
Yeah.
Are you doing the planning, or is she?
A little bit of both. It makes it easier when you split it up because we're both not into like the traditional ceremonies and all the steps you have to go through during the night. And so I think it's easy for us. We both want to do Colorado for the ceremony, and we both want to do New York. And so we've been up to Brooklyn, which I consider a lot like St. Petersburg. So we went up to Brooklyn to look for some venues up there, and I think that's where we'll wind up doing it.
Nice.
So it's really, we haven't picked a date yet, but I think it's easy for us because we want to do it on a Friday night.
You got some options there then?
Well, how many weddings have you been to where you like shake the groom's hand and you hug the bride and say congratulations, and then
And that's it?
you have your 1 minute and then you go back to your table or your friend's, table? Like, we don't want that. We want it to be everybody comes in on Thursday, we get married on Friday, or we have our party on Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday we get to spend time with the same people that came, and so we wanted to make it more meaningful, and just from like the experience of doing that. And so,
yeah, I've heard of like wedding weekends where you go in on a Friday. It's like a full sort of an itinerary for 3 days, right?
yeah, like it's more like a destination, right?
Yeah, destination wedding, yeah.
Yeah, and the ones that we've been to have all been great. And you feel like you're part of it. You feel like you're part of the experience, whereas some weddings where it's just you show up for the tradition, you're in and out. You don't really feel like you're part of it. You feel like you showed up and you're obligated to show up and you caught their attention for a little bit. All the destination weddings we've been to, we feel like we were part of it. And that's, I think, more important to us.
Little deviation there.
I buy it.
Yeah.
I buy it. So less romantic than that, which is perhaps my specialty. You're bringing the co-working office space, boutique hotels. Ryan, we'll just bring him back into the mix. He's got the food and beverage angle covered. What would you love to see someone that would be in the same ilk as you two come down to St. Pete and bring us here? Anything jump out at you?
Like a certain group, or
just a certain entity, business, something that St. Pete could use that would enhance the flavor in the same way the co-working and Ryan's restaurants and bars do, and your hotels do. Is there an opportunity, you think, for someone to step in? I know Ryan was talking about like a culinary incubator. That was a cool idea. Anything else you just like, if I had extra time and resources and I don't have them, I would go get into
Anything
this?
with music, art?
I think we have a lot of that there. I think Equatura is doing a good job of creating some momentum in that space. And I think they're heading in the right direction. I have a couple comments. I'm super opinionated, so I don't have any problem letting everybody know what my opinion is on what should be better about St. Pete.
This is probably where we get the cuss word, the first cuss word?
No.
Okay.
No, I told you I save them all for
we have to
home.
earn
That's what
it?
Italians do.
Okay.
So we turn the clock on. So, but St. Pete has a very big art community, right? We have all these great museums, but I think the one hurdle is that we don't really have a marquee venue for like a gallery where you could sell art, right? And so I've been up to Brooklyn with a tour of some of the influential people in the art community here, and we spent 4 days up there, and we came back and we had a round table, and there's like 16 of us. And I said, if you want to do this right and you want to give the artist the best opportunity to sell their art at the highest price and get some notoriety, you have to do the art events at a venue that's going to be a little bit more upscale and feel more expensive than doing, and this is no dig on
like a sidewalk
like
sale?
like a sidewalk sale or a main sale art fest. It's like, it's in a field, right?
It's out in the field.
So like this weekend on Friday night, we're doing an event for Becky Bukes. And she's been really popular. She's done a lot of murals in Tampa and St. Petersburg. But I think she gets it, and I was like, when she brought us with the idea, we're doing this, someone says, you need to do more nonprofits. I'm like, art is nonprofit to me. It's like, we need to help them as much as we help anybody else. And we help everybody, across the board, nonprofits, Children's Dream Fund, you name it. We roll out the red carpet. But she had the right idea, which is, hey, I'm going to do a black tie event, and I'm going to do it in Station House. I'm going to do it on the second floor. It's going to be really elegant. We're going to have champagne and do it right. And so I think that's an important element that needs to happen here in St. Petersburg. I also think that we need convention space, right? We need convention space here. We need businesses here on the ground, because all the conventions that happen in Tampa, St. Pete and Clearwater Beach are always on their tours, right? So why not have the convention space here in St. Petersburg? And then circling back to your question about who would we want to see in town, I think it's happening. I think the people that I would want to see in town are here. Related groups here, WS Developments in Tampa. You have the large apartment developers. You have Red Apple Group. You have developers coming over that have done flagged hotels in other parts of the county that are now coming into St. Petersburg that haven't been announced yet. I think that is actually, in the last week, I received 2 phone calls unsolicited from 2 companies out of New York, one being the largest hedge fund probably in the world, and the other one being a very, very popular and large equity group out of New York. And I printed out the email, and I was making sure it was addressed to me, because I was like, why are these guys emailing me and calling me? And I brought it into my partner's office. I was like, look at this. I'm like, these guys want to buy real estate and lend money in St. Petersburg. And so obviously I called both of them, had long conversations. I'm like, why do you guys want to go in little old St. Pete? And they're like, well, it's getting too expensive down in Miami, and Tampa and St. Petersburg are affordable markets with a lot of opportunity. These are coming from the largest companies in the world that develop here in the United States. That's big. Like, what more could you ask for than to have that institutional money start to flow into this area to complement what guys like me and Ryan and Jonathan Dow are doing, and all the other guys that are here kind of creating the personality for St. Pete? That personality has now attracted, and the climate and everything else that St. Pete does right has now attracted the institutional capital. And that's what we want, because they could build large apartment buildings that get residents downtown. So I think that's, kind of a dream come true for this whole area.
I think just as long as the residents are, working professionals as well as, retirees, right? I think that that's one of the things that we're looking at in terms of what we're attracting with all this residential build. What populations are we serving with that?
Yeah. The price tag on the apartments that are here, you have to either be working or you have to have a lot of money if you're not working. So I think that's a good demographic to have, right? So I think I'll take either one, because the retired ones that can afford that are spending money in our restaurants.
Right.
And then the ones that can afford it that are working class and either have a roommate or whatever, they are young professionals that are great for our economy here.
Right.
So
the real challenge are the jobs.
The businesses, yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a question. So time management aside, if you are working on anything right now in service to personal growth, what is it?
So outside of kind of the
crazy hours,
and everything else,
just something that you're focusing on and changing or improving in yourself, or.
Well, I think getting married is one.
You can't quit.
Can we go back to that?
Or maybe just just indigenous to you, right?
Yeah, I think family is important. I think for me personally, my free time is limited, and so that has been a challenge in the last 2 years. But, I don't beat myself up about working so many hours right now, because I'm trying to get to a certain point where I don't want to be working at 65. I don't want to be still doing what I'm doing now. So I'd rather work hard for another 5 years and not have to work hard. And so,
is there something within work, though, that you think is an area that you want to give a little bit of attention to?
Inside work?
Mm-hmm. Like in your work, habits or...
anything you're reading, or it's just sort of a mindset you're trying to understand better?
I think the biggest challenge that I'm working on is really the personalities and employees that we staff and the growing pains that we go through by taking on these new projects, because it's easy for me to acquire a piece of property, but when we have to implement operations and hire new people, I think my biggest challenge is my ability to interact with people and get them inspired and keep them inspired. And there's a sense of obligation that I put on myself to know that the people inside our organization are not just working for me to make money. Like there's a tremendous obligation on me to further their careers. And that puts a lot of weight on my shoulders. And so that weighs on me every day is like, how do we do that? And, those conversations work for me better with some peers of mine that I'll talk to about that and say, look, I need to meet with you. Like, how do you handle 80 employees? How do you keep them all motivated? What do you do? Because there's a tremendous amount of pressure on us to have some empathy for the people that work for us and not to just look at it as like, hey, this person's doing this job for me. Like, what can I do to broaden their horizons? What can I do to get them paid more? What can I do to cross-train them to make sure that they're satisfied with their job? And I think those are the things that, I've been focusing on and try to focus on more at the office.
And you talked about some of them being budding entrepreneurs. And so finding that balance between encouraging that, and you essentially have, the hotbed for that personality, but also not sinking resources into talent that's just about to jump ship, right?
You nailed it. That's exactly, the business that we're in. You call it a hotbed for that. It's exactly what it is. And you have to recognize that too, because it's a two-way street. I felt burned at times, people that I look back and I'm like, well, you just leveraged my platform for your own benefit. And, and this is after, laying out.
But then also
roadmaps.
You're saying like, good job.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. Great job. I didn't know that, I know you're doing business with half my staff, behind the scenes, great job. So, I think that, that is a big challenge because it's a two-way street, right? And I want to feel rewarded, but I want them to feel rewarded. And, the worst thing that can happen is when you dump a lot of energy and efforts into resources and then that happens.
Yeah.
But you nailed it. I mean, that's our biggest challenge.
Yeah. And by the way, you're hiring for that. Like you don't want somebody who A, isn't desirable to somebody else, B, doesn't have aspirations to move beyond where they are. I mean, that's desirable in candidates, right? But that's also the death knell of a long-term relationship.
It is. When Tech Startup Week was here and Gary Vaynerchuk was taking questions and, we went to the event in Tampa and like it was the Q&A section and all these people jumped in line. So I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to ask him this. But I wanted to ask him this one question, which is, how do you decide between when you should take on partners and when you should take on more employees? And that's like a key ingredient to businesses. And with partners, you kind of know what the expectations are and you've aligned yourself with them, right? But with employees, that's the challenge, right? Is, they want personal growth. That's what you're going after. And then you get them to a certain level and it's like, okay, what do we do with you now? Or they wind up going somewhere else. And so it's definitely a challenge in our business. I think for us to grow, we almost have to look at it as like when Outback looks for new locations and they have a proprietor that runs a location, they have a vested interest in it. And so I think with being in hospitality, and I consider the co-work aspect of what we do with Station House to be hospitality. You do the same thing every day. We have customers come in. We have to meet every single one of their needs and we have to keep them happy and we have to keep them coming back. It's the same exact thing that we do with our hotels. And any problem, whether it's big or small, the stapler breaks or whatever, the printer's broken or whatever, like we have to jump on it. We have to fix it then. Otherwise, when a person goes on vacation, you're making their life easier so they could vacation. Station House is when a person goes to work, you're making their life easier so they can go to work. So I think we have to take on that hospitality mindset when we do open more locations. And that's why I've chosen not to go out of the Bay Area with location. We've had opportunities to go in other states is because we really want to get the formula right here in town and have it be in our backyard before we decide what structure we do in another city.
It's still not too late to cancel the Tampa one, just so you know.
I thought you were happy about that.
I forgot my lesson.
Stakes are in the ground.
Sorry.
He's so bitter. I'm taking him to the groundbreaking.
He's going to cut the ribbon himself. He's going to make you cut the ribbon.
Run away with the ribbon.
Tear it with your teeth. Just tear. So when we talk about workspace and we talk about creating pods and areas for people to sort of plug in and to stay connected, do you have any vision as to how evolving technology will change the landscape of your interior builds? Go.
Well, I mean, technology is like outdated by the time you finish saying technology.
Exactly.
Right. And so that's what kind of has deterred me from doing a lot of high-tech things with our space is the fear of it being obsolete And so we try to just focus on the main touch points of technology that are important, which is your ingress and egress to the space, and which is, having proper credentials to get in and out of the space. Now, from a evolution of the office space, I think there's not a lot more to the technology in the space than providing good Wi-Fi and a comfortable place to work. And so I think as a culture, we've evolved to the point where, yes, we are completely mobile now. And it really comes down to, can we provide a comfortable environment for people to do business in? Because they have their laptops and they have their phones. But, beyond that, I think, technology doesn't drive the co-work as much as it drives like the hotel space. It's much bigger in the hotel space. And because you have Alexa with Amazon, you have Airbnb that provides, different technology now, and you have access points for hotels, and you have a lot of different amenities I think fit more on the hotel side of things than they do on co-work.
I know there's a large company locally that has different conference rooms, and it's certainly not technologically advanced, but it has large screens where then they satellite in, almost Skyping in people from different parts of the country to have conference calls. And so then there are privacy and confidentiality concerns. So that wouldn't be happening in the main sort of congregation space. It would happen in, conference rooms or other places. So it's interesting just to see how larger corporations and spaces like yours will be sort of pivoting with that expansion.
We will have a video conference. We're going to try to have a studio there on site in Tampa, which should maybe attract Joe.
Only
I said
Tampa.
I said the word studio.
Tampa.
So, those amenities are important to us. Video conferencing, obviously, but also, remember, it's a lifestyle too.
Yeah.
So we want to have a changing station too for people with kids. We want to maybe look into having daycare or night care. So we could accommodate the 24-hour entrepreneur and families, and it's like living and working have overlapped so much nowadays, right? Because we go back to people wanting freedom, you want freedom. And so you want to be able to maybe take a break for 3 hours during the day and go back to work at night. Like, we want to be able to accommodate everybody in the best way that we can.
Well, that's interesting. Have you been to, Google's campuses or some other, major employers that you're seeing the integration of childcare and some other?
Yeah, well, I've been to a lot of the co-works in New York. I haven't been to Google campus. I've studied WeWork and what they're doing, and large corporations. I've been to some big campuses, and that's kind of the common denominator, which is, you can't forget that people have lives. Even though they're working, there's amenities that need to exist. And so we're going to have showers. We're going to have locker rooms there, right? Because that's a convenience for people, right? And time is valuable.
Yeah, fitness maybe beyond yoga.
Yeah, we'll have
or
fitness.
Space for that.
Yeah, we have space for that in Tampa. So I'm just picking at
Yeah.
Joe.
I left.
Listen, I find the Tampa, that I'm not assuming that you have a Tampa grudge, but I just find
Not at all.
I lived in Boston for some time, and one of my least favorite facets of that experience was the grudge that the Red Sox fans had prior to winning the World Series, which I was present for. And then I saw the change in attitude almost overnight, and I found that to be just a big weight. We love you, Tampa.
Yes, we do.
Joe?
No, I
Something
love,
wrong
I,
with this
love,
microphone.
I love Tampa. I'm just, I don't know. I feel like I might end up being one of those people that, changes all the road signs so
We
nobody
don't
comes here like
benefit.
they do in some of
There's
those little
no-
California cities
Yeah.
and stuff. No,
We are
Tampa's
better
great.
together, right?
Better
Yes,
together.
synergies.
Synergies.
No.
Synergies.
I think that's what one of our guests said. They said
Ruined a
one of
nice
our
moment with that word. We don't say that here.
He hates that. That's his least favorite. I've podcasted with Joe for half a year now, and I have learned, if I've learned anything, is you hate the word synergy.
Well,
The whole is greater than some of its parts.
Isn't that
It's
written
our
on your wall?
must be more eloquent.
It's on our wall.
I feel like I've read that somewhere. You might know this, but we shot the Economic Development Corporation video. A lot of it was at Station House. Do you remember that?
Yeah, we posted that. So.
Yeah.
StPedc.com.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So that's the kind of stuff I like.
You know who directed that video?
And Tim Moore, Diamond View
Tim
Studios.
Moore.
Oh,
Ashley
awesome
did a great
job.
job.
Yeah. Good
It's
times.
amazing. I'll tell you, the power of video is beyond anything
You
else.
should listen to Tim Moore's podcast with SPX if you haven't.
He already
You will
has,
learn-
I'm sure.
You will learn more. Look at his face. Give him a drink and see what he tells us.
Yeah.
See what he tells us.
He
The
got
truth will
in
come out
today. He's
then.
like, so what are we
I am
doing now?
stoic. I am stoic.
I think it's 25 minutes, but it's some real solid knowledge about the video space.
It was some good knowledge in there, yeah.
I think he said you have 6 seconds to get your point across, or 3 hours. He said it's the sort of the spectrum of attention is so nuanced now, and I know they're having a blast with that.
That's like fine, right? That was 6 seconds, right? And so, we did our video a long time ago with Reef House Media.
Oh, yeah.
With Ronnie. And that was like the greatest investment we could have ever made. That video is really the easiest way to get people to understand who you are.
Somebody did actually send me your video when I was about to produce something, and I agree that was well done.
Yeah. I mean, it was all about the members. And we felt that was the easiest way because we found ourselves always trying to explain what Station House is. And I think there's no easier way to do it than through video, right?
Yeah. You have virtual tours available?
No, we don't do virtual tours because I feel like it doesn't do the space justice.
Yeah.
And so I kind of shy away from like someone like kind of clicking through the space and like doing the bird, the fisheye, panoramic view of the space.
Is that the only way to do it?
They vary. I've seen a couple pretty good ones.
Yeah, I think it depends who.
A lot of mediocre ones.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have that video and you have people interacting, like what more can you do than show?
That's true.
People living in the space and talking, and no one in that video
definitely flattens the energy if you do the virtual tour.
Yeah, and I think you sell yourself short too, right? Because you have so much to offer,
and there's no story.
No, and so we always try to encourage people to come to the location and feel the energy and be there, which is important to us. We hold a ton of events there, which is cool.
All right, that was good conversation. I appreciate it. We
kept it clean.
Yeah, we kept it clean. Still one more chance to swear if you want. We
about 3 more minutes.
We finish up
Get that in.
each show with a
clean.
We finish up each show with a shout out, and it's basically someone in St. Pete that St. Pete specifically, nowhere else, that you think is doing good work that doesn't get as much attention as they deserve.
Gosh, that's like putting me on the spot there. Why didn't you tell me that before we got on?
I know. Well,
that's not fair.
Ryan is so politically correct. he literally
No, you can't. No.
Oh,
you can't. Are you giving away?
What? No. I'm just saying that when I asked Ryan that question because he started sweating because he was so worried about offending someone, and I know Steve doesn't have the same sensitivity, so I'm not worried about it.
No. Okay, so this is a shout out to anyone that...
Yeah, just someone that you just feel like they're doing good work and people aren't noticing enough as they should, and they deserve a little extra
attention.
Somebody
who doesn't see you as much as they want to see you and really want to talk.
And it cannot be your fiance.
Okay,
Stop,
sorry.
Ashley.
I have my ring finger up. Somebody who misses you.
So somebody in St. Petersburg that's doing well that doesn't get recognition that they deserve. I don't know. I kind of feel like if I said that, like, maybe they do get the recognition they deserve.
That's fair.
So I think JP Dubuque.
Dubuque, yep.
Yeah. I think that is a great position to be in. Yeah. And I think it's super valuable to have that, economic development
president.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right?
He's running the show.
Which is an extension of all the things the city can't do, bridging the gap between public and private.
Well, it's
recruiting companies to come here and everything that they're doing. I think that is a good first step. Yeah. So I get excited when I see him.
Yeah, he's got a great energy. He works tirelessly, and he's clever too.
He's doing some good stuff for sure.
It's all about recruiting people to this area. It really is. I mean, the area can't grow unless we recruit talent from Boston and from New York and all these other places. And Panda Doc that came from San Francisco that we all had an effort in getting here. I'm just happy to see people coming here. Really, that's important. I think his campaign to do that and his efforts, I think, are super important.
Agreed.
Nice.
Shout out to JP then.
JP, that's a good one.
What's up, JP?
He'll be thrilled.
What's up?
He's listening. I was at Green Bench with JP last night and asked him if how many of the podcasts he listened to. He's like, well, I listened to 2 and a 10th.
2 and a 10th?
2 and a 10th. He's like, yeah, I listened to Chris and I listened to Craig Scher. And I listened to one more, which I'm not going to name. He goes, yeah, I got about a couple minutes in and I kind of lost interest and that was it. So I'm going to counteract your shout out by calling him out on not listening to enough of the podcast.
Finish the 90%.
Yeah.
Just tell him to listen to the tail end, to the 9/10th part of this one and then he'll be happy.
Yeah.
I like it.
Just skip ahead.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. And keep up the good work.
Yes.
Thank you. All right.
You've made it to the end of another great episode. For show notes, head to stpete.co to the show notes page, which includes links to all the resources mentioned in the show, as well as quotes and key insights from the show and information about the guest and the host. Thanks again to our sponsor, Big C. Head to Big C, that's BIGSEA.co to check out their work. And if you like what you heard, make sure to share this episode on social media and leave a comment. See you next time.